All right, so welcome again back to the DAC Pavilion. We're going to round out our panel program today with Andreas Kuhlmann from Cycuity, leading a panel of semiconductor security experts and practitioners who will help us answer how robust is your hardware security program. All right, take it away, Andreas. Thank you.
Tom, thank you very much. And welcome to the afternoon session on security. How robust is your security program? So what we would like to explore is not so much technology. There were a lot of panels on the various technology aspects and so on. We want to explore an aspect that I think anyone who is practicing security knows quite well, and that's more the organizational, more kind of, how do you get an entire company, how do you get an entire organization lined up behind security? Because as we all know, even if there are sometimes security titles in an organization, that's not necessarily where everybody is lining behind. But before we go there, what I would like to do is, let's do a quick round of introductions. So maybe we start from the left, and we start with Deborah from Analog Devices.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's working. I'm Deborah DeLace. I am with Analog Devices, and I am Vice President of Digital Technology and Strategy. As a group, we work in the Chief Technology Office, and our main mission is to really provide the organizational muscle, the scalable IP and processes, and right alongside our product teams in the area of security, safety, and software. And so that's what I do. I've been in security, I guess tangentially all my life. I started out in aerospace and in the military and GPS and things like that. I've always had security, even way back when. But did end-item product development, including encryption devices, as well as explosive detection security systems as well. So prior to coming to Analog Devices in the semiconductor space.
Thank you, Deborah. And Jason, you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jason Fung, and I'm with Intel Corporation, and I'm the Director of Offensive Security Research and Academic Engagement. And we are part of the Office of CTO, and we are under this organization called Intel Product Assurance and Security. And I've been with Intel for over 23 years, focusing on security for the past 16 years. As I remember, when I first joined this security organization, I know nothing about security. So I basically learned my way back on hardware and software, and then ultimately learning a little bit more about how it works, and then helping basically all the Intel product to build this security in mind, and also train the people, and also drive this academic and industry engagement. So this is where I'm part of.
Thank you, Jason. Joe, you want to go next?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Joe Tosterud. I'm with Microsoft. I'm the Director of Technical Program Management in Strategic Mission Technologies, where we're focused on accelerating chip design in the cloud. I'd spent actually the better part of 20 years in chip design in the defense and aerospace industry. Several of those years were focused on assessing different hardware security analysis and mitigation techniques and third-party tools. These days in Microsoft focused more on getting third-party hardware, secure hardware design techniques integrated into Azure in our secure environments. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. And now Vivek.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vivek Vedula. I'm a security methodology architect at ARM. I'm responsible for architecting all aspects of the product development lifecycle when it comes to the security. I got into security a while back, maybe 10 years ago, when I was part of a consortium, cybersecurity consortium that was organized by SRC, and they showed us all the cool things that you can do in security, and I was inspired, so inspired that I dropped my day job and started a startup, a security startup, which I failed miserably, and 2 years later I had to shut it down and come back. And then when I joined ARM, I got the opportunity to again get back to security and haven't looked back since.
Well, Vivek, now you scare me, right? So my name is Andreas Kuhlmann. I'm the CEO of Cycuity. a startup company in security, right? So we'll see how that goes. But some of you may know security. Just 2 weeks ago, we did go through rebranding. So we used to be Tortuga Logic, right? So some of you may know us as Tortuga Logic. So my career, I'm always saying I'm running on a 10-year clock cycle. So I was about 10 years at IBM in Yorktown Heights. I was very involved in the PowerPC design, verification at the time, EDA tools when IBM was still doing EDA tools. And then in the 2000s, I was at Cadence running the research organization at Cadence, and I see some faces here that, that look very familiar. And then I left actually EDA in 2010 and joined Coverity. That was in software quality and software security, run the engineer organization. I was really happy to be outside of EDA. 2014, Synopsys comes and buys us as the start of a new business unit in security. So I ran that business unit till about 2 years ago when I joined Tortuga Logic. So Vivek, we'll see how that goes. So I mentioned earlier, I want to really drive in a little bit more in the challenges that are not so much on a technical side. And I think we have very good representation actually here from processor companies, IP companies, a big player that is really getting big time into chip design. And of course ADI, right, as a long-term player in the semiconductor industry. So the first question I have for the panelists, and that question always will say, yeah, security is very important for us. But how important is it that you actually shell dollars out? How important is it actually that you extend your design cycle? How important is it actually that you hire a team and align the team behind that? So I want to ask that question, and maybe Deborah, we start with you. I mean, so ADI, how important is security?
Yeah, thanks for that. So first of all, I would say it was an emerging importance for ADI 5 years ago, which was why the company I was with was acquired by ADI, all around security. So they recognized the need. They definitely recognized the need from our customer base. We're seeing more and more customers, and it continues to grow and scale as far as the security requirements across the product portfolio. So there definitely is an importance there. I would say, convincing the product teams of those security needs is a different story, and I think we'll get into that as we talk challenges. But at the top level, I think the leadership recognized, yes, this is coming. It's going to become more important as time goes on, so we need to make a move, and that's what they did.
Anyone on the panelists have a different opinion?
So I would just say that few years ago, if you ask me this question, right? So we are one of those teams sitting maybe down the food chain in the validation organization talking about security. Today, we're actually sitting very close to the CTO, and we have also the backup of our CEO saying this is our pledge to our customers, that security first is very important. So it takes some time to get there, but we can promise our customers that your priority on security is ours, and we will transparently tell you everything about you, what you need to know to cover not just you, but your customer. So there is a journey from where we used to be to where we are today. So we can talk a little bit more about it maybe later on. And
Intel, you guys went through a pretty traumatic experience with Spectre meltdown, right? I think we all remember that. But I have to also say the response of Intel was fantastic. Some of you may remember the Equifax hack, where the CEO was essentially saying, well, someone in the engine room didn't run it tools. As a result, the CEO lost his job, right? But I think in terms of the response, which is equally important in security, I think that was a fantastic reaction of Intel.
It's not just Intel.
All right, Vivek, go ahead.
ARM has a pretty active CPU program too, that you probably are aware, and we were also impacted by Spectre and meltdown. I don't know if it's a badge of honor. But no, we did talk about it. We had the response, but we did. It was an impactful event, both from an ARM's credibility, or it's for all of us, right? I mean, when you see something like that, that it's a very well-established feature that we had, speculation, and being impacted by something like that, it was also an eye-opening time for us to have it more methodical. It's not like ARM did not care about security. We always had secure designs. We were doing secure designs. It's at that point it became something that, okay, we need to have a structured program, a structured manner in which we want to do. So that was a defining moment for us.
That makes perfect sense. Joe, you have quite experience on the DoD side, right? I mean, with Microsoft and also Boeing before, right?
Yes, and as you can imagine with Microsoft products, there's an immense amount of customer data being processed by all sorts of the offerings. But specifically hardware security, we're seeing not just a thrust to do it out of goodwill or altruism, but customers specifically saying that this is a discriminator and something they're starting to demand, whereas years past it was maybe more of just assumed or a nice to have. Yeah.
And are all of you seeing that more and more that the customers are asking more detailed questions about security, meaning what do you actually do, not just trust me, kind of, that you actually have to provide some evidence, right? Essentially, that's what we do in really convincing customers. Do you guys see that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing not only, to your point, the evidence and the artifacts through requirements traceability, but we're also seeing it around the product development lifecycle. And so a lot of questions around what are you doing with your supply chain, and as well as what are you doing through the whole development life cycle, through incident response, back to the Spectre meltdown, ensuring that we have those robust processes that cover the whole life cycle.
Yeah, basically the food chain, like coming from one customer goes to their supplier, goes to their supplier, right back to the top, right? So basically we are being asked by different vendors, different customers about, hey, how do you do these practices? What are the bugs? What are the issues? So after some time, we basically go out and just tell them every year. We have a report actually published every year, at least for the past 2 years, about our security report telling people about how many bugs we found internally, how many bugs externally are being found, and also how many bugs are being found through some Intel-sponsored effort, like Bug Bounty program. So I think by being transparent, it helps to build this trust. And now we are no longer being asked by people about how are you doing this. We are not disclosing to specific customers about what they are. Everybody knows about this.
Yeah, I just want to pick on that, Jason. The thing about transparency and showing what you have done in terms of due diligence and the reports that you were mentioning, it really helps even if you haven't done everything under the sun for security and put all the best mitigation features. If you have done the due analysis and communicate with our partners as to this is what has been done, this is not what's been done, or we could not do, and this is what you need to do in addition to that. That shows to a day, it goes a long way in building that trust and convincing our business, our customers that this is something that you can rely on. And this itself is a big step in the right direction.
As you guys, I warned you, there's going to be a question later in the panel where we're going to test that assertion. But one last question on this topic. I mean, we talked about customers asking, right? And I've seen in the software security world, very surprisingly, the automotive industry or industries that are actually very concerned about safety became suddenly drivers. I mean, in the automotive industry, the Jeep Cherokee hack in 2015 was a similar traumatic effect, that it had on Chrysler at the time, than Intel on the Spectre meltdown. And automotive has been really leading on the software security, with all the autonomous driving and all of this. Do you see similar? I think all of you play some role, right, in the automotive sector. Do you see them also as a leading industry potentially? Your mic is not on? Oh. So is automotive security also, do you see that as a potential driver, right, in terms of customers asking?
Yeah, and I'll even go to a place where in our company I talked about my team, security, safety, and software. And so we see all those three very coupled. There's a lot of overlap. So just like what we saw in safety, I think we will see in security. And then software, our focus is not just on product development processes and software in general, but open source. And we were talking about that earlier amongst ourselves of open source and how do you validate and verify the pedigree of your open source that you're using and consuming in your product development. So we saw all those as linked, and that's why organizationally we kind of structured it that way to leverage across those different functions.
Yeah, right on.
So ARM has an auto-specific IP. Each of our cores or IPs that we have an auto-specific version of those. From a safety standpoint, all the due process has been followed, and that's something that we've been sharing with our partners for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
Now, security coming in complicates this quite a bit because some of the security features they can compromise some of the safety requirements. Similarly, some of the safety requirements can pose a challenge to security. And this is especially true with the new standards that we have for security, for cybersecurity in automotive space. With the ISO 21434, it's a new standard, and our partners, and ARM being one of the providers of foundational IP, is a requirement from almost everybody in the industry as to what are you doing here, even if it's not an automotive IP. Can we have some certification? What can you do to help us be certified for this particular standard? So it's played a big impact.
Joe, what do you see on the defense sector, right? I mean, that's obviously right. It's very serious. But what do you see in terms of demand there?
Yeah, in terms of you mentioned standards and compliance and certifications. On our end, we're seeing a challenge. How do you educate your teams, and how do you even know these are coming down? And not every team can afford teams of experts in security. So we're strategically trying to have horizontals and verticals that can intersect and educate and consult. Just keeping up with those demands and getting them early into the product phase, their requirement, and not a late ask has been the challenge. So, not solved yet.
All right, let's switch to another topic, right? So,
can I ask a question, Andreas? Just to follow up
go
the
ahead-
question.
go ahead,
So you
Jason.
asked us about like customers asking for security, right? But I think the other point is also about many more customers are not asking about security. So very few actually cares about security, right? And I think this is why we are here, right? To talk about security is to promote that, right? There are government entities, safety for vehicles, there are privacy concerns, right? But I think we as a community, we as an industry, really need to go out to seek more of the customers' ideas about what are important to them and position them back to the security and privacy features that we are talking about here. And the Fruits company is really good at doing this, right? And we all as an industry, we also need to be doing that because otherwise we need the tools. Someone needs to pay for the tool. The product needs to be paid in order to buy these tools, right? The food chain needs to start from the customers.
Actually, I would like to challenge that a little bit and say the customers are asking. They just don't want to pay for it.
I love it. But Jason, I love that you make that comment. And by the way, it starts with us as consumers. We buy all kinds of electronic gadgets, that we're just connecting it to our house Wi-Fi. I don't know. Last time I looked at it, I think I have 70 devices in my house on the network, right? Did I check what they did for security?
Exactly.
What software is in there, open source components, what chips in there? No, I don't. But also, who would I ask? Where would I go?
And when I talk to some of the friends here, right, I actually got a question about, hey, Jason, for your company, do you really care about security for all the chips that you build? Right? So ask yourself, your laptop, do you care about security? Of course, right? You don't want a ransomware to be running behind the scene. Your phone, right? You care about the IoT camera at your home, right? So I think sometimes people are not realizing they are depending on security so much that they don't ask for it. Maybe they take it for granted until some doomsday events happen.
All right, let's switch topics. I think one of the things, my experience now of almost 15 years in security, when you talk about organizations, is you have many, many stakeholders. on these stakeholders, often a separate security team. Of course, you have an engineering team. You have marketing, product management, often IT, compliance, involved. And some of the teams, they don't necessarily even like each other, right, in terms of their goals and objectives. So question for you, who owns security? I mean, truly owning in terms of budget, decision-making, go, no-go decision, right? I mean, which is really the crux of the matter at the end, how seriously do we take, security?
Yeah, Andreas. Ultimately, for us, typically it's the product team. However, they're strategically aligning sort of a blended approach of stakeholders. So enterprise-wide, we have a set standard security development lifecycle where folks are all obligated to adhere to those best practices, the standards, and so on and so forth. However, leaving autonomy to that vertical product group, because everyone has their own unique vulnerabilities they're concerned about. It's not the same across the different products. So whether you have embedded security experts in your team, or if not, being assigned a security advisor from the global org, between that blended approach is how we implement it, but ultimately still in the hands of the product team, as opposed to a dictator at the top level.
I mean, I have to state, right, Microsoft on the software side was really the first company that implemented the secure development lifecycle, way ahead, right, of everybody else. And that was really at the tail end when we all remember that in the 90s, Windows got hacked left and right again. And I think Bill Gates took it on personally at the time to drive that security program. And it's really good to hear that this is really, broader in the products, a very good example.
And our experience is very similar to yours, Joe. The product teams own their products, and so they own and have the responsibility for making sure that their products will meet the needs of the customers, including security. Us in the CTO office underpin their product offerings with what does good look like? What are those best practices? Making sure that we ride alongside them and provide that expertise, like you're saying, to ensure that they've integrated security and the security IP properly. So that's how we kind of share that responsibility.
So who gets fired if there's an insecure product?
And honestly, that's a great question. Probably both of us. I don't know. It's a great question. But yeah, again, our role, we see our role as being provide the capability, arm the product teams so that they can do what they need to do to deliver the right product with the right level of security. And that's our responsibility to provide them all the IP processes, what good looks like.
Makes sense, yeah.
So we are doing very similar as Microsoft and Deborah, your team, right? So we are doing this decentralized model, but it doesn't come immediately as we started our security organization many years ago. So we used to be running decentralized organization where we do everything for everyone because we are the expert, right? We want to feel that, hey, we have the full control. We don't let inconsistencies come into the way, right? But sooner or later, we realized that the scaling doesn't work. There's so many people building products, and you only have few experts. Even 100 is not enough to keep up with the rest of the company. And also, we realized that by enabling and empowering the design teams and helping them to understand the culture and the mindset, now you stop a lot of these vulnerabilities from being introduced to begin with. And that's the part where a centralized organization, a hacking team, won't be able to compensate for them. So now we are basically, doing a mission control in a centralized organization. Whenever there are some product incidents that we need to handle, we are the first to help to work with the business unit. We give out all the trainings, the tools, the processes, but we let the product team to manage the rest of it.
Smart move, right? Delegate. All right.
So ours is a little bit distributed in that sense. There is no one central organization that owns. Obviously, the product teams have to make the final call whether they're comfortable with what went on, what different people did before they ship it out. but it's by design. We didn't want to have a single point of failure, right? So there is one organization, for example, I'm part of the methodology organization, so I'm responsible for ultimately making sure that the methodology is put in place correctly, all the processes of the secure development lifecycle. But the quality team acts as a check on whether the product teams have implemented it correctly. So we have third-party assessors, as in people in different organizations that act as a second pair of eyes to make sure that the products have implemented, have followed the process appropriately. So we have 4 different groups that make sure that they're all convinced that we have done enough in security, although we have different perspectives on what should be done. So
I really like, Joe, what you and Jason kind of also elaborated on, which means, start early. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it. Security is not an afterthought, right? Security is, you have to really start from the very beginning. What you said, Deborah, right? It's like, provide them with the means, provide them with the best practices, educate them, training, right? We have learned this really also in the software world. I mean, everybody realized, if you want to, before you release the software, you run some scanners, you're doomed, right? What are you going to do with the 1,000 vulnerabilities that you find, right? So you have to really start very early on with the training, with setting up the right processes, and then measuring as you go, right? I think that's the same thing in semiconductor as it's in software.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing, Jason, I aspire to your model, and hopefully we'll get there. I've envisioned I've said this to our CEO, that ideally security is owned by all the product teams, just like they own their digital design, just like they own their software design. Why wouldn't security just be another element of that? I think that's the journey that we're on right now. But to me, I agree. That's the vision.
I think it doesn't come easy to or come cheap for that transformation. And as what Andreas mentioned about, right, Spectre Meltdown really transformed the company about the perspective of security. And just before that, we were talking about, the security guys talking about, where is the Bill Gates memo going to come down from our CEO one day, right? And our wish has been granted, unfortunately, right? And then everybody learned about that. Now it is ingrained in every security, in any product engineer's mind. It doesn't come for cheap.
I hope that isn't what it's going to take for Analog Devices. Hopefully we'll learn from what's been happening.
Very good. So I want to actually, while we're talking here, there's a microphone over there. Anyone, any questions? Just get up. Yep. Would you mind using the microphone?
So my question is to you, Vivek. You were mentioning, I agree with you. You don't want.
Speak up a little bit. Yeah. Good.
You don't want one point of failure, obviously. You were mentioning in your team, is there like 4 people checking, like that part of the code? Do you guys have decided this is the sweet spot for people? Do you have any metrics of this is costing you, obviously? Was it not 6 people, 10 people, 2 people? Like, did you learn from that? What's your answer on this?
If I follow the question right, you're asking about any learnings from having this distributed model of having the security, but
I'm asking
ownership.
About how did you choose the trade-off of between the one extreme is 1 point of failure, and the other extreme is like you have 100 people looking at it. You said you have 4.
Yeah.
How did you choose that? Why is this your best trade-off? Was this just how it happened?
Oh no. So what I meant to say is we have the security process being implemented by the product team. But we have a third party, a different organization. For every product, we have someone called a security assessor. And that's usually a security lead who has implemented the STL process on some other product. And he or she is assessing this. And then they're walking through all the security implementation at each product development lifecycle, whether it's very early on what needs to get done when you are conceptualizing the product. We call it alpha. And during the various implementations, are there new threats that were discovered? Have you accounted for it? Have you mitigated those? Or have you threat modeled them and made sure that you don't have to mitigate them, whatever it is. That justification is something that a conversation happens. So that's the second level. And then you have the quality team coming in and saying that, have they followed all the processes? Have they used the recommended tools? Have they done the threat modeling to the extent that is recommended by the process organization, right? And then eventually the product owner and the engineering managers make a choice, whether that is, if the due process being followed, if they can meet the customer's requirements, and they're happy to ship the product and take any blowback if something went wrong, right? They might be saying, oh, there is something that we think is a security risk, but we are just going to communicate to our partners, and if something comes back, we will deal with it. That's a decision we leave it to the product manager and the engineering team.
Quick other question. You mentioned earlier about auto, and you said safety will compromise security sometime. Could you give an example?
Safety compromising security. So let's say you have availability of some memory location, right? Safety will want you to have that availability of that location to do the computation. Whereas security may say, hey, something compromised, I need to shut it down.
Got it.
So there are lots of examples. The other way also. I can give you the examples after that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Which is a really good question, because if you look at safety and security on the business side, safety is often a business driver for security. I mean, we talked about automotive before, right? I mean, I remember when the Jeep Cherokee got hacked, I met the head of security of Fiat Chrysler at Black Hat. So in our suite, and obviously the guy was traumatized because Charlie Miller and everybody was bragging on the conference floor how they hacked, the Jeep. And I asked him, how big is your team, right? Fiat Chrysler, not a small company. And he said 5 people. I said, you got to be kidding me, right? 5 people for a large automotive company. He said, yeah, we are part of a several thousand people safety team, right? So the business driver in automotive is really, safety, right? In other industries, a business driver maybe, compliance, or maybe like banking. I mean, there's totally compliance, right? Or you look at, some other, you do privacy, right, or data protection and so on. I mean, medical, for example, industry is very much about HIPAA. So I see always security is seldom a primary business driver, is often a secondary business driver when you look at this from a supply chain, right? All right, let's hop to the next question. So in your security program, and I really, we talked about it before, let's have the audience in mind, kind of some lessons learned, right? We talked about best practices, right? So in your experience, what is working well for you? What is working well, which is really something you learned over the years or you stumbled on it, and what's still challenging? What if you had a magic wand, right? I mean, what would you do besides getting infinite budget, right, and infinite amount of people are working on? But so let's dig a little bit into these 2 aspects.
Yeah, Andreas. So when we look at IP design, so at Microsoft we have a mixture of first-party IP, even I'm talking specifically hardware, but also extensive third-party IP. I mentioned earlier the security development lifecycle we follow and the experts we have. It works great for first-party IP. We have full control over that. Then you look at third-party IP, and that IP coming in, as we've all been talking about, is not necessarily built security-centric from ground up. And so we have all sorts of different security maturity levels coming in. And what we found, of course, is you're probably not surprised, is our ability to actually sit down and assess that, whether it's because it wasn't contractually obligated or companies are sensitive to revealing their IP to us. It makes it very hard to make that assessment. And if there's, of course, more complex third-party IP, there's many layers to their own supply chain, which makes it even further more difficult. You asked if I had a wand. So if I had a wand, something that would enable those suppliers to easily share what we need to know without exposing their own sensitive data would be wonderful to have. But that's very difficult at this point.
And I would extend on that. I think we had this comment before about the entire design supply chain. I mean, think about from small IP block getting in a larger IP block, getting on the chip getting in the box, the software is loaded on, right? And here we are, we have a box, right? Whether we are person consumers or, we are B2B customer, that is really missing. I mean, that whole notion of, what is exactly in the box all the way down and how secure is it? What works well Jason, I think you guys have lots of experience meanwhile over many years.
We make a lot of mistakes and learn about these experience, of course, right? So I think when you look at like countermeasures, architecture, security features, these are all technologies that you can deal with, right, with smart people, right? I think the hardest part is about winning the hearts of the people to be on your side. And I think we talk offline with Deborah, right? Oh, are you guiding people? Are you hurting them? Hurting, not hurting, right? So how are you helping them to realize security is another element of a successful designer's requirement? And how can you motivate them? How can you set the culture in your company so that you got the tone from the top, right from the CEO, right from the vice president, that I need your time to spend on building secure product, not just fast CPU, not just performant product, right? And this is the tone from the top that helps, right? But at the end also, you need to build these hacker mindset into their DNA, right? And this is the hard part. And as I mentioned about, I learned security from the startup, right? I only have computer, software, and hardware background, but they hire me because I have the two of the element out of the three, which is the security, which is missing, right? And I learned my way by asking the questions, doing the hands-on work, and trying to see how can I think out of the box. And you need to give people time to do that. So at Intel, we have these security challenges that we actually ask people to come and join us and see if you can hack something, if you can solve a puzzle. So you start with something easy and fun for them, and then eventually they may become the next hacker and to help you find the problem in your products.
Yeah, I liked your comment about from the top. And I would say that's one thing at Analog Devices that is working very well. I don't think our CTO or CEO has any kind of keynote speech where they don't mention the importance of security. So I think that goes a long way in communicating that important mission across the product portfolio. On the challenging side, though, I'll say anytime we have a conversation with a product team about security, their first question is, what's it going to cost me? And it's, what's it going to cost me money, full factory cost? What's it going to cost me from a power perspective? What's it going to cost me from an area size perspective? And that's challenging because
it's funny they don't ask that question about performance, right? If you give 2% performance, what is it going to cost me? No one asks that question.
It's exactly right. And so it's back to that mindset that we've been talking about, and how do you shift that conversation and change that conversation? That's been our biggest challenge.
Right on, yeah.
So obviously, I agree with you. I mean, having top-down, having the leaders emphasize on security helps. But let me talk about what worked. I mean, when we started off this program, ARM is a pretty lean in terms of the number of people that are assigned to work on this. So what we innovated, we came up with a training program where we could have it hosted across on the internet and on our internal servers. And instead of having the in-person training, having these in a phased manner and say, the security leads will help you understand using these set of steps, having this checklist. But in the next phase, you're going to improve on that, and we are going to have these additional tools and the additional layer of security that we're going to add, so that they are not completely overrun by all the aspects of security, the entire STL that Microsoft is responsible for imposing on the rest of us. Jokes apart. So that was something that when we came up with the whole idea of implementing this STL, we felt we don't have the resources, or it needed a full-time person to actually implement it on each product. So we went with a very evolutionary mindset And that really worked, and now all the product teams are geared towards this. Now, what did not work very well, or what is challenging, is getting the requirements from the product teams, from our customers, and knowing what to do. So our designers, we figured, they're pretty good at coming up with the mitigations if you tell them that this is a challenge. But the motivation from the management to invest that additional effort and not ask the questions about what's it going to cost for me to do, in order to convince them, we needed some additional motivation, something more specific from our partners, which is difficult to get, because all our partners want to ask is, we call our customers our partners. So I keep using partners as a word. But from our customers' perspective, we would like to know, how does a security vulnerability in software, how does it translate to Intel, and how does that translate to ARM, to the foundational block? And that's missing. And both ways, all we get to hear is, okay, what is it that you have done at the IP level? But that's not enough for me to go to the management and say, hey, we need to invest additional effort in security.
I really like what came up multiple times. Security is often a mindset, right? And as engineers are solely focused on, what's the functionality that I'm building? Let me make sure I build this functionality. I remember when the first web applications came out, for banking and so on, and there was a, very simple hack high school kids could do. It's called SQL injection, right? So instead of putting your username in, you put a little SQL command in the username. So you talk to a developer about it. The developer said, why would anyone ever do this, right? Well, to extract the entire database, for example, and get all your social security numbers, right? It's a mindset that is hard, right, to assume when you're coming from I'm solving engineering problems, right? All right, I want to open it up again. Any other questions from yeah, please go ahead, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kevin from University of California, Davis, and I'm a first-year PhD student. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions. First was regarding security vulnerabilities like hardware, reverse engineering, the supply chain vulnerabilities. So how does Intel or Analog Devices and Microsoft deal with emerging threats like and security features like logic locking? Do you have you adopted that in your technologies, or are you looking into that? And like threats like hardware trojans, where you have like your IP can be infected with hardware trojans, and without anyone even knowing that there's a hardware trojan, your data is leaked or your IP is leaked. So that was my first question. Second is, what advice and what is the outlook for academia, like for PhD students or graduate students or undergrads who are looking into hardware design, and how can they approach it from a hardware security perspective?
Now we're getting into technology, which we didn't want to discuss, but maybe a quick one from, I think, Joe.
Yeah, I can offer a quick one there. So to the first question, so we implement a variety of techniques, but I think the key point is we're trying to stay in tune and up to date in industry on what all the emerging technologies are, constantly assessing whether it makes sense, and we do that on a product team by product team basis. So I won't list out all the ones we use, but yes, we use them, and we very much need more advancements in those solutions. Yep.
I'm going to answer your second question. Do not follow what your PhD advisor is telling you to become a professor. Go to industry, get your feet wet first, then you can still become an academic and teach this. That's my personal opinion. So we have just a short moment left, and I have one last question. It's kind of the acid test that I want to ask each one of you, and keep it short, right? And the question is, you found the security vulnerabilities 2 weeks before tape out, product release, and you are in charge. You cannot say, well, I'm going to raise my hand and someone else. You're in charge, but you're also in charge of the business, right? You're not just in charge. So what's your decision? Are you going to delay it?
So real quick, and we talked about this earlier, security is part of system of systems, right? So I'll give you the it depends answer. What is the vulnerability? how impactful, how risky is it, and we will make a call based on that. So not all vulnerabilities are going to be the sky is falling, and so we will make a call on that. More importantly, though, I would ask the question, why are we just finding this 2 weeks before tape out? And that's, to me, the key question that needs to be answered on this, and back to moving forward and improving.
Awesome.
I agree with
totally great.
I agree with what you said. That's what I'm going to do. I mean, it depends on the severity of that vulnerability. But in most cases, we would go ahead with it and maybe release the next version and then say this is it.
So you go ahead, ship it.
Yeah, 2 weeks is a long time, by the way. We'll fix it. If you said 2 hours, maybe we'll be worried.
Any ARM customer out there, ask the question, is it the 2 week before or the 2 week after? No, just kidding me. So Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I couldn't have said it better. I think the real challenge is how do you make that assessment quickly when there's a fire drill? So I think for us, it's focusing on solutions and tools that allow you quickly make that assessment. But yeah, I absolutely agree. Yep.
And that comes into a decision.
Yeah, so I don't have a better answer. I think this is all about, the short answer is yes, right? The long answer is that let's look at the severity of the issue, right? We actually are driven by data, right? So the data actually help us to understand how exploitable the bug is. Does it require another bug in order to exploit this one, right? But I think the question that we really want to ask ourselves is that, are you ready to disappoint your customer if you ship a product out with bugs, right? That someone can exploit in the field. Are you ready to recall your product if it happens? So those are the questions that are driving our decision. If we believe this is not exploitable, if we believe the chance of risking our customers, our reputation to our customers is very, very low, then maybe we'll take that chance, right? But then otherwise, we are just going to do whatever it takes for the functionality of the product. We will delay it. Why not security?
Very well said by everybody, right? So that really concludes the panel. I want to really thank the panelists. I mean, really giving a very diverse set of views and experiences. Hopefully it was helpful for the audience. You learned something. I think everybody's going to be around for a little while. If there are any questions, right, please come up. Happy to give career advices and anything else you care or don't care about, right? So again, thank you so much, everybody.